Hey, welcome everyone. This is David with PTC Physical Therapy. I'm the author of Body and Balance, and you've joined us on this Google Hangout for the first of 4 webinars we're going to be doing to help kick off my virtual book tour for Body and Balance. So we're going to let a few more people get into the room here. This is somewhat on short notice because my schedule's been somewhat crazy lately. So if you are coming into the room now, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind telling me where you're from, put your name in the chat box there. If you have any questions, you can put them in now, but we may have a special session just for questions. We might take a few at the end. I want to run about 20 minutes to go through this first session, and we're going to jump right into that now. Hi there, Jen. Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I don't know where you're, Jen. Oh, all right. You're in warm, sunny Florida. What's the temperature there now? I can't even tell. If anyone else is listening from New England, we're in the middle of about our 4th snowstorm here in as many days. So if you send us some sunshine. So I want to jump in. Let's actually get through the presentation, and then what we'll do is I'm going to jump in here. So you're going to see my screen here in a moment. I apologize if you see any tunneling to that, but I'm going to pull up the presentation now, and I'm going to go to full screen, and then let me do that now. I'm going to play the presentation. So thanks again, everyone. This, as promised, is a 4-part, and this is the first webinar in a 4-part series for my Body and Balance book. Came out the end of last year, is doing very well. In fact, it stayed on the Amazon bestseller. It currently still is on the Amazon bestseller in preventive medicine. It has actually got as high as the #2 ranking, so I'm very proud of that. And it's also going to be a boot camp of sorts to try to tie in both my book and my weight management university course. So if you came into this room, you probably arrived there because you either A, bought the book, or you're already taking the course. That's how I announced it. My Weight Management University, if you're not familiar with it, is at WMU101.com. I'll talk a little bit about that as a resource at the end if you have the book currently and want to continue boosting your nutrition and fitness IQ. So I have to, further ado, I have to give you a warning. You are about to hear something that will get your metabolism going and hopefully your body back in balance. So the title of this first session is The Truth About Weight Management. And I have to put this out there that I know you probably, with all the information out there online, why should you believe me? And I'm going to go over my credentials. And why should you believe me, especially when people have been failing at diets for over 300 years? And the failure rate, if you're not aware, if you've taken my nutrition course, you know that I do a page on that course where I actually go over the history of diets, over 300 years of failure. And you'll find that diets are cyclical, but the main theme is that historically there's about a 98% failure rate. And if you didn't know, diets started way back in the 1700s with the invention of the corset. But go into my course. That's a page that you might find rather interesting, the history of diet. So I've been at this a long time. I am a dietitian, former dietitian, I say, for 17 years. I'm a licensed physical therapist. And I've been around about the time I was a nutrition student, a dietetic intern. The picture center top, if you've been on the weight loss roller coaster for long enough, you remember this image vividly of Oprah on her OptiFast program. Atkins, again, is another one. All these diets, again, are cyclical. The picture that faded out there is of Oprah after losing 67 pounds on OptiFast. And she, as we know her story, she's gained it back and then more. The Zone, Sugar Busters, South Beach, you get the point. The ones at the top are from, about the late 80s into the 90s and into 2000 or so. And then more recently, there's a trend for everything anti-carb again. At the bottom, you'll see some of the popular books, New York Times bestsellers, Wheat Belly and Grain Brain. And again, the paleo movement, gluten-free. And again, right side, bottom of the screen, the number of different weight loss pills that come and go. So I just gave you that background to let you know that I've been at this a long time. Again, I started as a nutritionist and dietitian for 17 years. I went back to get an advanced degree in physical therapy. I have an undergrad also in exercise physiology. I'm a father. I'm also a stroke survivor. And if you're not familiar with my resource up top, you'll see nostroke.org and no PFO. I do put that out there only as it relates to the truth about weight management and nutrition, because having had a stroke and having had a background in nutrition, I've always been fascinated about nutrition, but I dove deeper into that when I was looking at trying to heal my brain after my stroke. And that's how much of the content in Body and Balance, it's not about my stroke, but it's about some of the tools and resources and some of the research that I came up with to help get my own body back in balance, and some of the discoveries along the way about food policies, et cetera, that if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about, but I'll touch upon it on this brief lecture or webinar today. So these are just some of the information that I wanted you to be aware about, some of my volunteer components that I work with, as well as some of the press and some of the writing I've done for Stroke Smart, Advanced for PT. So you can certainly learn more about me on my websites, WMU101.com, as well as physicaltherapycoach.com. But I just wanted to, it's a kind of a busy slide, but I wanted to tell you how that relates to what happens in my practice as a PT. And the main thing I want to mention here is why weight loss focus is wrong when you're talking about weight management. It's really about managing fat. If you manage your fat, you manage your health. And did you know that for every pound of excess body fat you carry around in your upper extremity, there is a cumulative effect of adding 3 to 4 pounds of pressure to the joints of your lower extremities. So for example, someone who is 50 pounds or carries that around in extra body fat is actually adding an additional 200 pounds of pressure to the joints of their hips, knees, ankles, each and every day, all day long. So as a PT, as a physical therapist, that certainly plays into many of the ailments that I typically treat in my practice. And I'll refer to that in the next slide. But I put the logo of The Biggest Loser on here because in talking about what they get wrong in the media about weight loss and fat loss, is The Biggest Loser, actually, if you're a fan of the show, in season 1 actually got it right when they actually measured body fat. They actually had their contestants in week 1 doing an underwater weighing test and being submerged to actually measure their body fat. And they abandoned that, unfortunately, because it's not as sensational from week to week to have someone lose 1 or 2% body fat. But it is if someone drops, miraculously 10 pounds on the scale or more. So they kind of sold out to popular pressure. But why does all these diet myths concern me? And why is, America's obesity epidemic very concerning to me as a therapist and as a nutritionist, and why I wrote my book, Body and Balance? And that's really, if you look at the list on the left of this slide, is what I see in my clinic from day in and day out. all the top ailments that I treat have a direct correlation to body weight and to body fat. Um, we're wearing out our joints, we're wearing out our discs, we're wearing out um, many of the common ailments that we're seeing are due to overweight or overfat. And in addition to that, there are higher risks associated with most chronic diseases and overfatness, like heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, diabetes, certain cancers, gout, sleep apnea, autoimmune disorders, metabolic syndrome, and now that we know there's a definite body fat and inflammation connection, um, we really need to reset our focus on body fat, and not simply dieting to lose weight. So why all commercial diets fail? So if we're getting into the truth about weight management, we really should look at the fact that conventional diets only emphasize weight loss. And the key to permanent weight management is understanding this difference, that there is a difference between weight loss and fat loss. And throughout that, the missing link is certainly education. Diets are simply faulty in design and doomed for failure because they create a negative focus. And it's proven that you can't have positive thinking with a negative focus. So the truth and the best way to manage your weight is to actually have your body fat measured by either caliper, scale, and I do provide that in a resource in Body and Balance. And if what I'll do is I'll make that available, and also in the replay for this, I'll put some of those resources under so you can follow that link. But I put these in order of most accurate to sort of least accurate, informative. Body fat measurement is the best. Waist to hip ratio would be the next. Body mass index would be somewhere in the middle there. And height to weight charts, and then the bathroom scale. If you have my book already, you know that I spend a whole chapter going on over these differences. So we're going to move along, and we can have you refer to that as a reference if you want more background on why these measures are inaccurate and which ones are the most accurate, like I just described quickly in this list. So we're going to continue with the truth, and the truth really gets down to fat. It's a physiological fact that fat is stored energy. Your body will adapt to starvation, and fat requires oxygen to be burned. A lot of these common facts are ignored with some of the popular commercial weight loss programs. What they don't tell you is the truth is your body does not have an enzyme to convert fat to glucose. And as I mentioned throughout my book, you have to swallow the e-pill. We'll talk about that. I do mention it briefly in my course, but in my book, I do key in on the e-pill. So your personalization is certainly the key to your success. What you should know is one size does not fit all. People are genetically different. People have individual lifestyles and individual food preferences. They also have individual caloric intake requirements. The big myth then is by restricting calories. If we look at 9 calories in 1 gram of fat, you may not have heard that there's about approximately 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. And the typical American diet is about 3,000 calories. So if we continue with the big myth, in theory, if you weighed 200 pounds and reduced your intake by 1,000 calories a day, you should lose about 2 pounds a week, or that would be over 100 pounds in a year. In theory, if we went by that same mechanism, by the second year, you should be in the around a negative 8 pounds. And we know by looking at the guy on the right there that simply doesn't happen. So what does happen? With conventional diets, you lose muscle and not fat. They're therefore very faulty in design. Your body is very efficient at storing fat and is much easier to convert muscle into energy or break down lean tissue than it is to utilize fat stores. So conventional diets actually starve muscle and lower your RMR, your resting metabolic rate. Most diets also don't include any activity, no oxygen, or they don't introduce you to that all-important E-pill. So here's the truth. Conventional diets can actually cause damage. Here's what happens. Restricted calories is perceived by your body as starvation. That compromises your immune system. It agitates your nervous system. You don't know too many happy people that are on diets, and that's the reason. There is a hormonal component that is actually counter to what you're trying to achieve. Your body is actually breaking down when you should be looking at building lean tissue. So let's pull this into practice. Let's meet Joe Dieter. And Joe, let's say, is going to his high school 25th reunion. He's 40 years old. He's 6'1", weighs 200 pounds, and he's about 24% body fat. Typically, he's that typical American. He eats about 3,000 calories a day in 2 big meals. Joe skips breakfast, has a late lunch, and an even later dinner. So let's look at his restricted calorie protocol on one of these commercial weight loss centers that he sought out to lose his weight, to look good for his reunion. They immediately took him and reduced his calories to 2,000 a day. What happens was he dropped to 190 pounds in 2 weeks. He started to feel sluggish, started to get headaches, and his metabolic rate started to decline. After about 5 weeks of dieting, he hit a plateau. So what did they do? They put him on a 1,500 calorie standard protocol. Whenever someone hits a plateau, they reduce calories further. His weight dropped to 180. He felt further and further sluggish, increased headaches, and he felt like he needed to be napping frequently. He then started to develop more cravings for sugar and fat. So let's look 10 weeks out, what happened? His post-diet stats show that he's about 170 pounds after 10 weeks. His body fat is at 22%. And the final program results are that he lost 30 pounds, but only 2% of body fat. So after 1 year, let's look at what happened. He's now 41. He's up to 203. His body fat is now increased to 32%, and he's only taking in 2,000 calories. Remember, he started out at 3,000. So what happened? His body broke down muscle, lowered his resting metabolic rate, ended up with a higher body fat and a higher weight on the scale. So a lot of investment in time and money for little results, and actually a poorer result in that his RMR was lower and his body fat was actually worse. So there are different philosophies to weight loss. The old is, like I just mentioned, throughout the history of diets, you must conform to their program. The new philosophy, if you prescribe or have read my book, is that you need to learn how your body actually works. The key is education. And you are unique. You have to know that you have your own metabolic footprint, and it's shaped by many factors. So here are some of them. If you haven't picked up on this by now, your own body has its own metabolic footprint, and all these factors here play in. So we're going to move through the elements of individuality and give you some tips for getting your body back in balance the right way. It has once been said that we dig our grave with our teeth and we ruin our heart with our mind. And this is where this triangle comes in. When I'm working with someone, I look at all these factors: stress in the center of the pyramid, and then nutrition, certainly as your base, your foundation, has to start with good foods for your body. I put under there lightly supplementation, and that's only if you are not meeting your requirements for optimal nutrition through your diet. So you have to know where you're starting before you start to think about supplementing. Also, the E-pill or exercise, and a big part of this is rest, relaxation, and recovery. And these all play in with one another, because if you're, for example, on the right base of the pyramid, if you are missing sleep, you're not rested and recovered, what do you do to get through the day? You usually blow off your exercise, or you start reaching for quick, fast foods to try to boost your energy level. You might take in more caffeine. You might resort to trying to have an extra bit of sugar later in the day, usually as some type of quick snack. Not the best choice often, but you're trying to actually restore balance. So when we're looking at energy balance and nutrition, we have to look at those individual requirements. We look at on the left calories in as your energy in, and your RMR and your movement, or your resting metabolic rate, as total energy out. RMR is about 75% for most people of their total output. There's usually a small part of lifestyle, meaning the movement associated with their day or their work day, or leisure time, and then any formal exercise. But RMR is the biggest component, and that's why when I talk about the energy balance from an output point, we look at ways to boost RMR. So a little bit more on nutrition. Your body certainly requires a specific balance of protein, fats, and carbs. Excuse me, I'm going to take a quick drink here. And that balance is certainly determined by how your body converts these elements into fuel in your past diet and eating habits. So, and again, in food preferences. So, if we're going to look at where to start, you need to know your numbers. You need to know that time-tested energy balance equation. Most people don't. Most people, the fact is, most people, the adults I work with, don't know how many calories they consume each day. And when they're actually measured, adults who say they know actually consume 20 to 30% over the calories they estimate. And if you consider that consuming only an extra 100 calories over your daily needs every day can equal 10 pounds excess body fat in 1 year, you see why it's kind of important to get a handle on where you're at. So not knowing where you're at as far as where your body and your nutrition stands, I say it's like writing checks without knowing what balance is in your bank account. So a little bit more on nutrition, just to give you some takeaways. I tell my clients tips as far as getting started is to think of FOG. How do you lift that nutrition FOG? You want to think of FFOGG. And if we started at one point, you want to look at finding out if your body is hydrated. So you want to address fluids first. I talk about that in my book, and I really going to point you to that resource. Fiber is the next thing. Again, and for the sake of time on this presentation, I'm just going to tell you that most people who don't have any idea how much fiber they take in a day probably take in less than a quarter of what their body actually needs. Most people take in less than 10 grams. A healthy, balanced body with proper nutrition, optimally, this should be at least 35 to 50 male and female. With that number or that ratio in mind, most people, again, barely take in a quarter of what they should be taking in. And the O here stands for oils. The omega-3 to omega-6 ratios are many people I look at and correct for dietary deficiencies. Those numbers are skewed. Omega-6 oils are sort of your more processed oils, so associated with some of your fast foods and packaged products. And your omega-3 are considered with your deep water and cold water fish. The oils in those omegas should be higher in omega-3. Those are your healthier choices. Again, I mentioned a whole chapter in Body and Balance is dedicated to this. So I'm going to just say that most diets, when we look at them, are about 20 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3. What I like to do is have individuals restore that to get to a point of 2 to 1. If they can't do that, 4 to 1, where you're actually taking in a much better percentage of omega-3s in terms of that ratio. The other important area here is greens. Most diets are very acidic. The power of greens, again, mentioned in my book in detail. If you take the advice or nutrition advice of two things in the book, it's the 2 G's here: greens and avoiding GMOs or genetically modified organisms. So if you're having trouble getting your greens, first learn about the powerful components to them, what they do to the cells in your body. But the easiest way to take in more greens is to include more green leafy salads, soups. If you're having problems, just making time to make those on the run, learn about smoothies and getting in some powerful greens into your day by blending in some fruits and some vegetables into a smoothie can take on the run. And in my book, I give you a couple of starter smoothies to give you some tips. But the GMO component, I dedicate a whole chapter called GMO Nation. I won't go into it here, but if you're not familiar with what those are, go to mynutritioncoach.com. I have a bunch of food documentaries there. That's free to jump on, and I have an entire channel dedicated to what you should know about GMOs. So I'm going to leave it at that, but that's probably one of the most important components to cleaning up your diet and eating clean is to eliminate GMO foods. So let's get into the truth on exercise because I'm running a little bit behind here. But when we're talking about swallowing the E-pill, you should know that a comprehensive weight control program, one which includes exercise, is the only effective treatment for long-term weight reduction and weight control. That's the reality that most people do not want to admit to. They think that the latest weight packaged product is going to be their solution. You have to swallow the E-pill for all those reasons talking about that I mentioned in the beginning slides about you need oxygen to break down fat, so you need to move. So here is one of my tips that I mentioned, the power of EPIC. So what is EPIC? One of the biggest tips I mentioned in boosting your resting metabolic rate and getting your metabolism going is the power that we see with EPIC, or excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. This can work two ways for you, either through aerobic or anaerobic. Again, my book goes in detail about backgrounds on both of these, but I bring up this slide here because this was me as a young intern. This was actually my resting metabolic rate test when I was a dietetic intern. And the important thing here is that my measured a predicted rate at that age at the time. I'm much older now, but I bring this up because it fascinated me. The coincidence was that and the significance of that test date was that was a day after the Boston Marathon, and I had just finished the marathon. I was working the next day and had the opportunity to have my metabolic rate measured. And what you saw and what you're seeing on the slide is that my predicted rate should have been around 1,870 calories. But on the day after the event, my body's regulator, or my metabolic rate, or my furnace, was burning extremely hot from trying to recover from that long event. That was about a 4-hour marathon for me. You could see a day after the event, I was 63% greater than what would have been predicted for my metabolic rate. And that was the act of the muscles trying to recover and repair. Things are accelerated, and that's EPIC basically. Normally, aerobic exercise, 40 to 60 minutes or a short bout of aerobic exercise, will only raise your resting rate for up to a couple hours. And I go into detail in my book about this. But what studies have shown is you get actually better afterburn effect from anaerobic exercise or weightlifting. The act of the muscles repairing and rebuilding after strength training actually gives you an elevated RMR for up to 24 hours after. So to harness the power of EPIC, and what it does is it can fight off that term that I hate so much called creeping obesity. Sarcopenia is the loss of muscle mass, and that's kind of what a fancy term for what happens when we start to lose muscle as we age, or we start to become less active, or we suffer from Goya syndrome, which is basically get off your acetabulum. That's a nice PT term for get off your butt. But we tend to, as we get older, the term creeping obesity is not so much that we automatically get fat. It's that we start to become a little less active and we start to eat just a little bit more. And that bit of creeping obesity has to do with the fact that there's a slight decline in our resting metabolic rate every decade after we reach about 40 years old. And that offsets uh, some of these gains in weight that we've seen. Sometimes we don't adjust our calories down, or we don't realize that and pick up exercise probably at the most important time in our life, when we are at the same time fighting off the sarcopenia. So there was a very famous study by Bill Evans up at Tufts. At the time, I was a PT student that really caught my eye, and he actually did something that really proved that it's never too old to build muscle. He took a subset of um, older individuals. In this case, they were 80, 90, and even 100-year-old centenarians, I think you would refer to them as. And he put them on a strength training program. And what he showed was not only did people functionally move to higher levels and lose, sometimes in many cases, their assisted devices. He got people out of wheelchairs, got them up and moving and walking. And he actually measured the fact that strength improved, therefore their function increased, but also they actually were able to build muscle. So that was, up until that point, it was thought it was sort of inevitable that you would lose muscle. So he disproved that. And that had a big impact on me, because it showed the importance of keeping people strong as we age and keeping people informed that they need to swallow that e-pill. Excuse me 1 second. So let's move quickly into supplements. I am running behind. I promised you I'd take about 15, 20 minutes at the end if we have time to take questions. But let's talk about supplements now. Yes, Sandra, we're going to hold that question. You have a good question, Sandra. I'm going to hold on. Sandra's asking about best supplements for weight loss. Okay. Let me, we're going to touch on that. Actually, I'm going to key on that in 1 second, Sandra. Okay. Thank you. So the thought about supplementing is, you often hear that modern technology depletes our food. There's pesticides, chemicals, cooking, heating. They're modifying with GMO, the animal feed. So the quality of our food is undoubtedly declining. And that's what I want you to think about when you start to read that chapter on GMO and think about making alternate food choices. But to Sandra's point, do you have to buyer beware, basically? Sandra's question was about what are the best supplements for weight loss. Now, you should know that any claim right now is those claims made by supplement manufacturers, they're self-regulated. What I've found and what I've been told is, basically, unless a supplement manufacturer is saying that it prevents cancer or cures a disease like cancer, oftentimes it is buyer beware, and they don't have to back their claim. So you do have to be very cautious when selecting supplements and know, in fact, you really need it or not. You should know that most are heat processed and coated for shelf life. And I make this suggestion to anyone who asks me about supplements. It's well worth it to investigate a resource called consumerlab.com. It's an independent testing agency. Their logo is down on the bottom left here. They abide by GMP standards. You may or may not be familiar with that term, but they randomly pull products off shelves, and they independently test them and will list on their site what products pass. For example, they'll test vitamin D, they'll test omega oils. They're the same company that tested protein bars or energy bars a while back and found out that many of them, in fact, I think only 8 of 24 that they tested passed for the level of protein they said that was in the product. So it really is buyer beware. Check out Consumer Lab. And you should one point I mentioned that there a lot of supplements have not been GMO verified. They're as GMO, a non-GMO movement is becoming more popular. I do notice recently that some products are listing that they have non-GMO ingredients. So that's important as well to consider. So how do you achieve your nutrition goals? To kind of wrap this section up on nutrition, you have to focus on fat loss instead of weight loss. You want to discover more about how your body works, and you want to become a food expert by learning more about food. And you can certainly purchase my book, Body and Balance, or take my course, Weight Management University. You want to design a menu that's around your body's needs. And I would give you another tip here is you want to front load your calories. Remember Joe Dieter, I said one of the fatal mistakes he made is he had 2 meals a day, late afternoon lunch, and then a late evening dinner, and then went to bed. You want to front load your calories when your body actually needs them. When it wakes up from a 6 or 8 hour sleep, it's actually starving for food. You need to replenish the glycogen in your muscles and in your liver, which the glycogen stored that your brain is utilizing when you sleep. So front load, if you're going to overeat at all, you start with breakfast and then taper your calories throughout the day. So use them when you need them. And then your most important thing is to close that kitchen after dark. If there's ever a time to diet, it's after dinner. Your body does not need those calories. Go to bed hungry. How to swallow the e-pill. So you want to retain a fitness expert because you cannot build fitness on dysfunction. If I have a little time, I'll show you one of the new workouts features we have in Weight Management University. It's a video-based weekly edition or library of exercises built in to give you motivation for movement and to swallow that e-pill. Also in Body and Balance, my book, I do talk about the smart movement screen. You want to design an exercise program around you and avoid the monkey see, monkey do that I say people often follow when they go to the gym without any instruction. So jump in, do the workouts that we have on Weight Management University, or seek out a health and fitness professional or a licensed physical therapist like myself. You want to exercise at least 4 days per week. You want to chart your progress and find a team to keep you accountable. Again, incorporate strength training. This is EPOC, EPOC, meaning you need to tap in to that formula for raising your metabolic rate. And that comes about with strength training or some type of anaerobic or circuit type strength intensity program that builds muscle but also raises your RMR between workouts. And you want to end load your cardio. It is known that it takes about 15 to 20 minutes, or you have about 15 to 20 minutes of stored carbohydrate in your, or circulating, I should say, glucose or glycogen that comes available when you start to work out or to move. As your heart rate elevates, you start to burn off some of those sugars. You have about 20 to 30 minutes available, and then you start to tap into other fuel sources, i.e. your fat stores. So what you want to do is end load your cardio. Use your high intensity training at the beginning, your strength training after a warm up. And then if you're going to jump into any type of cardiovascular training, do that towards the end where your high percentage of fuels used will be from fat stores. So education is the key. I said it at the beginning. That's the missing link of most diet programs. So I'm going to encourage you to take a look at my weight management course, WMU101.com. On the replay, and after this, if you do sign up for the replay, you probably will now see at the bottom, I'm going to put that link in for anyone live now that wants to take me up on Weight Management University at a considerable discount. I'm going to take $60 off that course, and I'm also going to include workouts, which I'll show you at the very, I'll just do a quick little demo of that so you can see what I'm talking about. But I'll give you a substantial discount as a thank you for staying on to the end of the webinar. If you've already read Body and Balance, I urge you to jump in and continue to learning by doing Weight Management University. If you don't have the book, you can get it on Amazon.com. It has been a Amazon bestseller in preventive medicine now for about 8 weeks, so I'm very proud of that. So how do you achieve your goals? The most important thing in the takeaway today is to take action. You need to make a healthy lifestyle commitment. And I want to thank you. I know I did run over. Um, if you want, you can register for session 2. I think what we'll do is I'll save those questions for session 2. I have a good one coming in. I'll take one from Keith here. Where can I get my RMR measured? Good question, Keith. I'm going to put that. It's actually in the resource section. You do have to log in to register for the Body and Balance resources if you have not done so already. That is in there, and there's a RMR and Body Gem and MedGem locator that you put in your zip code, and that kind of will give you an idea. I can't guarantee those facilities. You'd have to make that call and check out yourself. But I do talk in my book about how to prepare for that. And actually, Jill is writes she had it done, but her trainer, Jill, your trainer took your or measured yours after you were on the treadmill. That's totally wrong, Jill. That whatever measurement you got there are certain pre-testing requirements. No caffeine, no exercise, no food for 3 to 4 hours prior. So if he got you on a treadmill, that is not your resting measure. That number I would guesstimate is probably 30 or 40% higher than your true RMR. So yeah, Gary, the end of the session here. I do appreciate the amount of time we went over. I do see a lot of questions coming in, but let's do this. Hold your questions or fire them off here. I will get all of these, and in session 2, we are going to go where we pick up where we left off. We're going to go into the Smart Movement screen, and we're going to talk about coming up with a plan, specific plan for your nutrition. So we'll dive into that a little bit deeper, and that will, if you do register, I'm going to give you a little bit of homework so you can come prepared. I'm going to give you some tips on how to find out if your body is in balance from a nutrition input standpoint, and then we will go over that on session 2's webinar and give you more resources to prepare for the 3rd session. So sign up if you want to continue. I really appreciate, we had about, it looks like 72 people. Just about everyone stayed on. I think we lost a couple of people. I think I went over. A couple of people were jumped in directly from the Google Hangout. So thank you, everyone. I do have your questions from this session, and I will get to each and every one of them. So that is all for now. Thank you. This has been David Dansereau, author of Body and Balance. This has been the first of a 4-part webinar series for my virtual Body and Balance book tour and boot camp. So keep sending me those questions in, and I look forward to addressing them on session 2. Have a great day, everyone.